The newly employed criminal quietly threw the last body into the river and said, "I'm sorry if I delayed. I was just being a little bit cautious." The killer observed him for a while and said, "Our job here is done. Let's go." The new criminal followed behind the killer until they got out to the road. The killer told the new criminal to go back home for the time being until the dust had settled, while he got into the truck with the driver and they drove off. The new criminal started his car and drove around for a while until he was certain that the other two had left. After that, he drove back to the spot and thought about how to accomplish what he wanted to do. After a while, he suddenly came up with an idea. He went to the trunk of his car and took out a board that had different electronic components in it before heading back into the bush. Anita had already gotten tired from trying relentlessly to get her hands free. Her arms were aching from being tied behind her back, and she was sweating profusely, not just due to fear but because the sun was shining directly on her face. When the criminal came back, he untied Anita's hands, and for a moment, she felt as if they were going to fall off. She stared at him in fear, wondering what he was going to do to her. He took the handkerchief tied around her mouth and wiped the blood from her hair and face before throwing the handkerchief away. Since her gown was too revealing, he gave her his jacket. But before they left the bush, he took out the electronic board and put it inside the inner pocket of the jacket Anita was now wearing. She stared at him in surprise, wondering what he had just slipped into her jacket when he said, "That is a tiny bomb, and I have the detonator in the pocket of my jeans. I'm taking you to my house right now, but remember, if you try anything funny, I'll make sure you go up in flames." Anita became more afraid as she truly believed what he said. When the criminal saw that Anita believed him, he became a bit more relaxed and held her hand as they both walked out of the bush. He reminded her, "If anyone asks, you're my girlfriend. So act natural, or I'll have to kill you." Anita nodded and forced herself to smile at him. Her heart was racing and everything felt like a nightmare. She still couldn't believe all those girls were dead, and she was the only one who survived. She didn't know what he meant when he said she was more useful alive, but she silently prayed that her life wouldn't spiral into something even worse than death. The criminal led Anita to his car and placed her in the passenger seat while he got in the driver's seat and drove off. Anita kept thinking of a way she could escape, and when they drove past a police checkpoint, she was tempted to scream for help. But she remembered the so-called bomb in her jacket and kept her mouth shut. He lived in a secluded and quiet part of town, much to Anita's dismay. His room was a complete mess. Cocaine, tobacco, and alcohol bottles were littered all over the floor. He led her into the house and locked the door, then took back his jacket, which smelled just as bad as the rest of the room. He noticed Anita was still standing and staring at him. He looked her up and down for a moment, then seemed to snap out of a thought. "You can sit on the bed," he said gruffly. "Remember what I've said, I don't want to kill you. But if you try to act smart, that's exactly what will happen. You've seen this place, no matter how much you scream, no one will come. So it would be wise to listen and do what I say." Anita nodded and quietly went to sit on the bed, which she found dirty and uninviting. After a while, he threw a big t-shirt at her and told her to go take a bath to get rid of the blood smell on her body. Anita thanked him quietly, and as she walked toward the bathroom, she overheard him making a phone call. The person on the other end was a woman, and he told her to bring some clothes and makeup. Anita's heart began to race again. What was he planning now? As she entered the bathroom, she looked around for an opening to escape through, but the only window was tiny and barred with thick iron rods. He must know I can't escape through here. That's why he let me in without worry, she thought bitterly. After bathing, Anita couldn't bring herself to use the towel in the bathroom. It looked filthy. She wore the big shirt over her wet body, her hair still dripping. When she stepped out of the bathroom, the criminal turned to look at her, but this time, something shifted in his expression. He took a step toward her but then stopped himself. He was clearly battling some dark instinct. He ran a hand over his face, then muttered, "Go sit down. We'll talk later." Anita didn't hesitate. She walked to the far end of the bed and sat, curling her knees to her chest again. There was another knock at the door. After a few seconds, the criminal let go of Anita. She scrambled into a corner, covering herself and curling her legs in tightly where he had forced them open. When he noticed that she was still shivering and crying, he rolled his eyes and said, "Take a chill pill and relax. I just needed to confirm that you really haven't been touched before. That's all." His words made her stomach turn, but she didn't dare respond. "Now listen," he continued coldly. "A nice lady will be here soon to glam you up. Don't try to act smart or give her any trouble, or I'll get really mad. Got it?" Anita nodded quickly. Her body trembled, not from the cold, but from sheer panic and confusion. Why were they trying to doll her up? She had thought the worst had already happened, but now her mind was reeling with new fears. Would someone else force themselves on her? Was she being prepared for sale? For show. She curled herself tighter into the corner and kept her eyes low as the criminal began pacing back and forth, checking his phone and muttering impatiently. Soon, a knock came on the door. A woman stepped in, carrying 2 large bags in her hands. "What took you so long?" the criminal snapped. "Do you know how long I've been waiting for you? If this opportunity slips past me, you're done for." "Calm down," the woman replied smoothly. "It's just past 6. We have almost 2 hours to prep and get to the venue. Let me do my job." The criminal scowled and walked out, leaving the woman alone with Anita. The woman approached her with a warm smile. "Hey, sweetheart. My name is Kate. I'm here to do your makeup and get you dressed." Where are you taking me?" Anita asked, her voice shaking, her eyes wide with dread. Kate crouched down beside her and gently said, "Don't worry. We're just going to the market. You'll watch a few auctions, that's all. No harm will come to you. I promise." Despite the gentle smile and reassuring tone, Anita didn't believe her. She'd already seen what kind of people she was dealing with. And when Kate began unpacking the contents of the bags, revealing skimpy tops, fishnets, G-strings, and shiny accessories, Anita knew the woman's intentions were not as harmless as she claimed. Still, Anita knew that resistance wouldn't help her here. Not yet. Not now. She told herself to stay calm, observe, wait for the right moment, and run. After about 30 minutes, Kate called the criminal back in. "She's ready," she announced. He stepped into the room, looked at Anita, and a satisfied smirk grew across his face. Kate then handed Anita a long robe. "Put this on. We don't want to attract attention just yet. Once you're at the venue, you can remove it." Anita wrapped the robe tightly around herself, feeling humiliated, exposed, and increasingly terrified of what lay ahead. She sat stiffly in the car, barely able to move comfortably due to what she had been forced to wear beneath. More than anything, she was terrified of what would happen when they reached the destination. Meanwhile, Melvin arrived at the market 30 minutes early. The moment he stepped inside, he was overwhelmed by the chaotic buzz of activity. The air was thick with tension, and most of the items on display were clearly black market goods, artifacts, weaponry, stolen art, and other illegal treasures. He pulled out his phone and called his friend. "I'm here," he said quietly. A few minutes later, his friend met up with him, and together they made their way toward the auction hall at the back of the market. The place was packed. Dozens of men in dark suits, some with bodyguards, filled the seats, all waiting eagerly for the next round of bidding to begin. Melvin leaned into his friend and whispered, "If I didn't show up tonight, I would have lost that necklace forever." "Patience," his friend replied with a nod. "It'll come up soon." Several items were presented, rare antiques, furniture with hidden compartments, gold-studded ornaments, and bidding flew rapidly between the buyers. Melvin barely paid attention. None of this mattered to him. His interest only sharpened when the next item rolled onto the stage. Not a thing, but a person. A hush fell over the crowd. A cage was wheeled in, its iron bars enclosing a young woman dressed in dark, skimpy attire. Though her face was partially covered by a blindfold, her features were stunning. Her posture had clearly been arranged to appear seductive. Her hands chained in front, her stance forced into an unnatural pose. Gasps, murmurs, and lewd comments rippled through the room. Melvin sat up, eyes narrowing. "What the hell is this?" he asked. His friend glanced sideways. "That's a premium auction item. Some clients prefer something alive." Melvin's blood ran cold. The girl looked familiar. The shape of her jaw. The way her hair was braided. Even beneath the heavy makeup and blindfold, something clicked. He couldn't breathe. It was Anita. Melvin stared at Anita in disbelief, stunned by what he was witnessing. The man presenting her to the crowd spoke confidently, like a seasoned showman. "Fresh out of the oven," he declared. "An angel to fulfill your wildest dreams. Only 18, untouched, obedient, and eager to please. Starting bid, $50 million. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The price was steep, but judging by the heated glances being exchanged across the room, Anita had caught their attention. Turning to his friend, who seemed utterly fixated on the stage, Melvin whispered, "This is insane. It's completely illegal. We should call the police." His friend looked at him like he had grown two heads. "Come on, Melvin. I know it's your first time here, but surely you understand how the black market works. This place doesn't operate by the laws you're used to. Even if you call the police, nothing will happen. These people run things differently." He leaned closer. "Besides, girls like her get auctioned off here all the time. It's horrible, yeah, but it's not new. Just stay calm and wait for your necklace to be up. No need to get involved." Melvin turned his gaze back to the rotating cage. There she was, Anita, her face partially veiled, but clearly in distress. Her lips trembled. Her breathing was shallow. Tears slid silently down her cheeks. She didn't scream. She didn't even move. But everything about her screamed fear. A man in his 60s raised his bidding card, offering the first bid of $50 million. Melvin's stomach turned. The man's eyes lingered too long. His mouth twitched with a sick kind of anticipation. Melvin could almost see the image, this young, terrified girl in the hands of someone like that. The thought made him feel sick. Another man called out 53. Then another, 60. Then 70. The room began to blur in his vision. Melvin couldn't stop seeing Anita's face. The terror. The silent plea. 90 million. One bidder called confidently. Going once. Going twice. 100 million. Melvin said suddenly, raising his card. His voice cut through the crowd like thunder. His friend whipped around, eyes wide. "What are you doing?" Whispers spread through the room. All eyes turned to him. He could feel their stares, their judgment. But he didn't care. Not this time. The earlier bidder raised again. 120. Melvin didn't blink. 250, he said. Gasps erupted. That number, 250 million, was outrageous. The room went quiet. No one else raised their tag. Even the presenter looked surprised. Behind the scenes, the criminal who had brought Anita to the market stared in disbelief. When he'd arrived, he had suggested auctioning her at just $1 million. But the host had taken one look at her and confidently raised the bar to 50. Still, never in his wildest dreams had he imagined someone would pay this much. He made his way closer to get a look at the man behind the voice, Melvin. He didn't look like the typical buyer. Young, sharp-dressed, composed. What did he want with a girl like her? The criminal couldn't stop grinning. His gamble had paid off. Sparing Anita's life had turned out to be his luckiest decision yet. When the word "sold" echoed across the auction floor, Anita felt like her entire world collapsed. She didn't know who had bought her. She hadn't dared look. But as the cage stopped twirling and the lock clicked open, despair swallowed her whole. She remembered what the man had whispered to her before bringing her here. His threats burned into her mind. If this doesn't work out, I'll make sure your end is slow, painful, and private. No one will find your body. You'll just vanish, and the vultures will clean up what's left. That memory had frozen her in fear. It was why she hadn't screamed, why she hadn't begged for help. She had obeyed every command, terrified that any resistance would trigger the violent end he promised. Now, standing in a cage surrounded by men who had argued over her like she was merchandise, she felt broken. She had once believed that surviving meant there was still hope. But now, all she felt was betrayal. The world had let this happen. And the man who had bought her? In her mind, he had to be like the rest. She promised herself, the first chance she got, she'd run. Or find a way to end this, on her terms. As the cage door opened and footsteps approached, Anita clenched her jaw and whispered to herself, "I will never belong to anyone." After hearing that Anita had been sold to him, Melvin felt relieved, but also uncertain. He had no idea what he was going to do with her. His friend began to tease him. "I never knew you were into girls that young. I thought older women were your type. Doubt your fiancée, Jasmine, would be thrilled about this little D2. Melvin's brows furrowed in irritation. "What nonsense are you talking about? Watch your mouth, Terry. I don't find that kind of joke funny." Terry threw his head back and laughed. "Relax, man. Don't take life so seriously. I was just teasing."